You're listening to Podcast Hum COVID Gyan, your one-stop resource for scientifically reliable information on and conversations about the novel coronavirus and COVID-19. Hello everybody, I'm Shantala Haridas from India Bioscience. With the recent outbreak and the rapid spread of the novel coronavirus, we at COVID Gyan wanted to take a deeper look at viruses, the novel coronavirus in specific, and how they can impact the human population. Today, we're chatting with Dr. Krishnan Raghunathan, who is a virologist at the Children's Hospital at the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you, Dr. Raghunathan, for joining us today in this chat. Can we begin by discussing what is a virus?
Viruses are entities which we consider to straddle the line between living and non-living. If you look at another human, or if you look at a plant or a mosquito or so on, we consider them to be living. Whereas if you look at a pen or a notebook, we consider these to be non-living things. Very instinctively we know this. In case of a virus, it depends on where the virus is. Viruses can replicate inside another organism. Now, when they are inside this organism, they make multiple copies of each of themselves. This happens whether the organism is a plant or an animal or even a bacteria. Now, it's specific for a particular virus where they actually multiply and make many copies of itself. Inside such an organism, these viruses are considered to be living. But outside of this, they just exist. Just as how a rock exists, how a pen exists, they just exist. We consider them to be non-living outside of these organisms. So they are what we call as pseudo-living organisms. Now, viruses have extremely interesting properties. First thing to know about a virus is they're extremely small. Like you take the diameter of a hair and you make it 1,000 times smaller. That's probably the size of a single virus. They are in fact like 10 times smaller than that of a bacteria. And they are extremely simple. So, for instance, a human being has 20,000 genes. On another hand, like the smallest virus has probably 3 or 4 genes at the max. Yeah. And now, so they are very minimally equipped. They try to steal most of what they can from the host organism itself. The final thing to know about a virus is it's extremely diverse. We have characterized probably like around 5,000 different viruses. But there are probably millions of those that exist that we still don't know about and we still have not characterized.
Viruses are fascinating entities. There are a lot of different viruses. So how do new strains get created?
So the first thing to know for answering this question is how information is stored in a virus. Typically, this is stored in a DNA or an RNA strand. In case of the novel coronavirus, this is an RNA virus. So the information is encoded in the RNA. Now the viruses make copies of itself inside another cell. Now when they make copies of itself, they make mistakes. Think about it as when you're trying to copy a book onto another book and make multiple copies of itself. You keep making mistakes, right? And instinctively, if you have a copy editor, the copy editor can see these mistakes and correct them. In normal cells, like in our cell, we have such copy editors that can correct our mistakes. Viruses don't have such copy editors, and hence they make a lot more mistakes. In case of influenza virus, which causes a lot of flu, they make like a mistake for every 5 copies it makes a mistake. Another way that viruses can actually make more different strains is what we call as recombining. If 2 viruses infect the same cell at the same time, they can actually exchange the genetic material and make a new virus. And so these are the 2 ways in which viruses can actually make a new strain. And in the novel coronavirus, both of these that have happened.
And is it possible to also engineer a virus in the lab?
Yes, it is definitely possible. And we regularly do it. In fact, a lot of times when we try to make a vaccine for a virus, we make mutations to the virus. We actually introduce segments of DNA to it. So, and what we know from a lot of work that has gone on in the field is that whenever you make a mutation in the virus artificially in the lab, we almost always tend to make the virus less effective. it's very hard to make a virus as potent as what happens naturally.
Let's move on to now looking at how viral infections spread. Can you tell us a bit about this?
From a broad perspective, there are two ways by which viruses can actually spread. It can be direct. One human being can give it to another. For instance, in case of the coronavirus, a person sneezes, another person is in the same area, they can actually get infected by the virus. So it's from a human to another human transmission. It can also be indirect. For instance, in case of dengue virus, a person who has disease, a mosquito bites that person and takes the virus from that person and transmits it to another person who does not have the disease, and the new person gets the disease. So this is an indirect method of transmission. So both of these can happen for a viral infection.
Now that we have seen how new strains of viruses emerge and how viral infections spread, what are the ways that we can treat these viral infections?
There are basically two ways of controlling a viral epidemic. One is prevention. So you want to control the viral epidemic before it begins. This is typically done through vaccines. The other one is once the virus has taken hold on a population, you want to treat patients. This is typically done using antivirals. But let's first take vaccines. So in the vaccine, we actually take a small portion of the virus or a virus that is not as potent. We give it to the human beings and they develop immunity towards the virus. So when the virus actually attacks the person, finally, the body is already familiar with it and can mount a response to the virus. Vaccines work. So if there is a vaccine available, always take the vaccine. That's very important, not just for coronavirus, but for every other viruses and other bacteria. So the second method is antivirals. These are drugs that are used to treat the disease after you get the viral infection. So a word of caution before I start discussing more on antivirals, many chemicals can actually kill the virus, but you don't want the chemical that you take to be more damaging to you than the virus itself. My advisor used to call this as the gasoline effect, and you don't want to have such a thing. You don't want to burn down the house to get rid of a mouse problem. So one should not drink hand sanitizers or other things that people randomly prescribe on the internet. So let's get back to antivirals. A virus functions only inside another host cell, and hence a certain precision is needed in trying to develop a drug. So this typically results in a long time frame for drug development. A new drug, for it to come to market from when you actually synthesize it, takes almost 10 years. So this is the time that it takes for us to make sure that the drug is effective in not just humans, but we first test it in animals and so on, and we finally come to humans, and we make sure that the drug is safe to use in humans. So it is important to know that this is the typical time frame for looking at drug development. This is one of the reasons why people are interested in repurposing existing drugs for which the safety is already known. In case of coronavirus, you might have heard a lot of news about how anti-malarial drugs like chloroquine is being repurposed to use to treat COVID. This is important. We still don't know the efficacy of such a drug. We are still testing this out, but these tests are much easier than the other one. One final caveat that I want to say is that all pathogens, especially viruses, can start developing resistance to the drug. They are quote unquote very clever. And so you start treating patients with this drug, they can start developing resistance. And hence a continuous research and development is needed to come up with a new litany of drugs every time when a viral infection starts.
We have heard about the different ways to treat viral infections. One of the advisories that is given for COVID-19 is that people should wash their hands often. Can you explain how this works?
What happens when you use a soap is it destroys the coat of the virus and makes it very vulnerable, and the viruses in quote unquote dies. So don't drink the hand soap, but use it to remove the viruses on the hands and on our skin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raghunathan, for helping us better understand the coronavirus and viruses in general, and how they have and continue to impact the human population. At this point, we're going to take a break in the conversation. Do join us in the next podcast for a trip down the ages to look at the history of pandemics and how these have impacted the scientific and medical landscape. Thank you all for listening. Do take care, stay safe, and watch out for more updates from COVID Gyan. For more information on the novel coronavirus and COVID-19, visit us at www.covid-gyan, that's GYAN.in. COVID Gyan is a multi-institutional effort to create, curate, and spread scientifically reliable information on the novel coronavirus and COVID-19. Here you will find answers to frequently asked questions, mythbusters, relevant research efforts, a breakdown of the science of the current outbreak, resources to help you stay fit and healthy in the current times, conversations with scientists, health professionals, and other experts in the field, and useful links that we have curated from across the web. As possible, these resources will be translated into 11 Indian languages. Until next time, listen, engage, and share.